here's some basics, and I love this guy from Schoolhouse Rocks. Do you remember him? He's
Yes. Oh
a
my
big part of
gosh.
my childhood. Um, so I think that might be one reason why I am into government stuff. Okay, so just some basics. Legislative session convenes at 10 o'clock on the third Wednesday of every year with 60 legislative days, and we work on a 2-year biennium. So um, first year is always odd, second year is even, and bills pending at final adjournment of the regular session in the first year of the biennium carry over, which means so this year is the first year of the biennium, 2021, and every bill that's been introduced this year, even though we call them dead, unless it's been like held or, held is like seriously dead. But if it's been deferred, there's still a chance that it come back, but usually not. Deferred means dead, but it can come back in the second year. So that's why you see bill numbers that are like way up in the thousands in the beginning of a second year of a biennium. So that's just like some basics to keep in mind. Bills have the force and effect of law. It starts with HB or SB for House bill or Senate bill. Resolutions are requests. So rather than requiring action, it's just please do this or making a statement, that kind of thing. And I think these are sometimes underutilized. And I've been recommending to various groups that they at least advocate for a resolution, because it's hard to really oppose a resolution sometimes. But if you can get your foot in the door and get the legislature educated on a specific issue through resolutions, then you're laying a good foundation to get some bills through. And then a committee. So each of the two houses, the House and the Senate, they're divided into, maybe a dozen committees or so on each side. And they're groups of members appointed by the leadership of each house to discuss legislation and related matters in specific categories. For this group, most of your bills are going to go to the health committees first. The House side, it's HHH, which is health, human services, and homelessness. And then on the Senate side, it's just health. So it's interesting how everything sort of shifts from year to year in terms of committee, but those are the groups. These are important dates to know. The lateral deadline is a deadline that a bill has to meet when it's moving through the process, I'll read you the definition and I'll annotate. I need reading glasses now. Finally, what do I do with them? Okay. All bills referred to more than one committee, for example, those with multiple referrals, must move to their final committee in the originating chamber by this day. So February 19th is the first lateral, and the second lateral is March 25th. So that means if there's been more than one committee that the bill has been referred to, it's got to be in that last committee by that day. Otherwise, it's not going to go through the process fast enough to survive. So this is a big deadline. The deckings are March 3rd and April 7th, and a decking is defined, first decking is defined as the deadline for bills to emerge from all their committees with committee reports filed and be submitted to the clerk of the originating chamber. The decking ensures a mandatory 48-hour opportunity for final review by the chamber's members before they are asked to vote on the third reading. And the third reading is a reading in the House. So that's when all the members of the House take a vote on it. Conference committee is April 15th. My calendar here didn't have the last day of conference, so I didn't include that here, but sine die is the last day of session, which is April 29th. So that's the last day that they gavel in, like, okay, we're done for the day. So the conference committee's season is going to be a little bit before this date. So 2 sets of deadlines, one for the House and one for the Senate. A lot of people call making these laws sausage making. I guess they think it's really painful to watch. I think it's rather fascinating, but I don't know, they call it sausage making, which is kind of funny. I just recommend for people who are really interested in making some changes and advocating for various legislation to understand the relative level of power between the houses, the chairs, the leadership, and make sure when you're following a bill that your testimony, I think it's really tempting to just repeat the testimony that you submitted on a first version of the bill, but as it moves through the process, it's going to be amended. And sometimes these changes are really, really different. Sometimes there's a process that they call gut and replace, where they completely remove the contents of the bill and then replace it with something unrelated to what was there originally, although it should still relate to the title of the bill, which is things like relating to health, relating to mental health, relating to APRNs, relating to behavior analysts, those kinds of things. The contents of the bill needs to match that title, but that's it. And the committees can gut and replace as long as those contents relate to that title. So make sure that you are aware of what your current draft looks like, and that your testimony matches that. It can be discrediting. So know who the key decision makers are, who are the lead chairs, anticipate the viewpoint of the lead chair in both houses. And I know Joy and John, we've been talking about perhaps like, oh, this is what we think Senator Baker will say, this is what we think Rep. Yamani will say, Senator Keohokalole, I said his name properly. So Senator Keohokalole and Rep. Yamani are the two chairs of the health committee. So those are the guys that you need to like really kind of evaluate and study and see, what their pet issues, I would say. Anticipate their viewpoint. Have they seen the bill in the past? What was their position in the past? Consult committee reports and draft changes from prior sessions. So sometimes some bills keep coming up. So you can take a look at the testimony submitted by stakeholders that may be on the other side of an issue. If you read their testimony from years past, and I can show you where that button is on the legislative website, then you will have a jump start on your testimony for the current bill moving through. What is the viewpoint of the chair or of the next referred committee? So a lot of these bills will start with health and then they'll move on to like the Judiciary Committee or Finance or WHAM. If there's a bill that's going to require a lot of appropriation, then you can expect that's not going to pass this year. And that's like, they often say that bills will go to the money committees, Finance and WHAM, to die. So always kind of be ready for a fight if it involves an appropriation of general funds. Know the players. What other key legislators have problems with the proposal? What will the money chairs think? Ascertain and anticipate any reservations and prepare to address them early. I had fun like finding the images for this.
These are great.
So find legislators who champion your cause, introducers possibly, and make it relevant to their viability, effectiveness as a leader to their constituency. So for example, telehealth is a big issue right now. It relates to access, and you can try to rally your neighbor island legislators to get them on board. I think they would be a really good contingency for you to work with. Your issue may become a valuable bargaining chip. Respect the staff. So I was a staffer. I was a staff attorney for the House Consumer Protection Commerce Committee from 2009 through 2012. So I just sort of became a fixture during that time. And my boss at the time, he passed away. It was Rep. Herkes, who was chair. He passed away in 2013, but he just got in the habit of passing things off to me and I would just run with it. He's like, do whatever you want to do. So I think a lot of the staffers have that kind of power. So be careful when you call their office. Be careful, when you're talking to these people. Be careful when you email them. They could be the one who's actually making the decisions. I kind of lost some of my text here. So are they writing the drafts or the committee reports? They may brief the decision makers on the bill. They may make recommendations. These are all things that I did. So respect the staff. Know your other stakeholders. Take care of your people, especially your volunteer workforces, because these guys, you can rally them to submit testimony. So I think this is great if you're going to have a little tutorial like this, and maybe you can play this video later. Make it a party, somehow make it enjoyable for them so they can engage, and they'll be happy to do that. Another thing is understand your opponent's positions. And I mentioned before, you could look at testimony submitted on a similar bill in years past and anticipate what they're going to say and offer solutions to the naysayers. Maybe something that they haven't even considered. Sometimes they see something they don't like and they're just like a hard no. But perhaps they don't understand the lay of the land. Perhaps there's something that if you just explain to them, maybe in some testimony, maybe this just happened earlier this semester or this session where the APRNs reached out to HPA on some of their testimony, like, oh, we saw you were concerned about this thing, but actually we've got it covered and here's some more information. So there was this sort of communication happening outside the legislative process, which may have very well have solved the issue. And they reached consensus outside. And I'll just say the legislator that I worked for loved it when that happened. And one of his techniques was like, okay, you guys go in your own room, sort of like what is that parable, splitting the baby kind of thing. Like, you guys go in a room, you work it out. And if you can't, then I'm just going to split the baby. And that was really motivating. So I would encourage you guys to maybe look for opportunities to do that. And then you're not at the whims of the legislature. Discredit unfounded reservations with evidence to the contrary. Consider collaborating with the enemy. Oh, I think I have a title here called frenemies. Yeah, frenemies. Consider collaborating with the enemy, understanding their needs and offer solutions that don't impact your position. Okay, split the baby, I said. So assume you will see them again, perhaps as strange bedfellows. So build, don't burn bridges. And your civility will be remembered longer than your opposition, I would say. And take the high road if possible, exhibit reasonableness. And I think, okay. Be prepared. Don't wait until you learn about the hearing. Not all 48 hours are equal in our busy lives. And I'll just add, they've been waiving this 48-hour notice requirement quite frequently over the last couple of weeks, and it's been a real scramble. So I think we have a head start going into the second half of session because, we know what bills are in play, so we won't get caught flat-footed as much, but I expect a lot of the same sort of thing happening. 48 hours waiver is, happens, and then we get the notice and we got like a day to pull it together. So I would figure out what your priorities are, get your testimonies drafted, be ready to see for any amendments in the committees and act on it immediately. Draft in advance, set up feeds and notifications online, and I'll show you how to do that. Prepare and share sample drafts for others to inspire ideas. And with that, I will add, so you may have your association submitting testimony with whatever position you all decided together that you're taking, but some of you may have other pieces to add. And I would, encourage all of your membership, to add whatever narratives they might have, their unique perspectives, and the volume of testimony will be really hard for them to ignore. So find examples of models that work to support your position. I'm a big fan of looking to other states to see, like, oh, look, state of Washington does this and state of New York does that. There's model legislation out there. So I don't know, how much of that is out there for MFTs, but perhaps you can find some stuff that helps to legitimize your position because other states are making it work. And consider drafting the actual language. And if you do it yourself and submit it, then the drafters there will have a better sense of what you've got in mind rather than trying to decipher it from oral or written testimony. So your testimony is, in fact, fodder for change. Find examples of models that work to support your position, educate decision makers with your research. Don't be afraid to recycle testimony or ideas that resonate with you. Plagiarism isn't a problem in this process. Your points may become part of the legislative record and later consulted by the courts. And I'll just add, this is something that I did as a law clerk. I worked at the Intermediate Court of Appeals, and I would dig into testimony of legislation to see like, what was the intent? What was the intent of the legislature? And you could call that from what everyone was saying in the testimony and the committee reports. So I'm a big fan of getting that info in the record and make it real salient. So some hapless law clerk down the road doesn't really understand what the black letter law says. They can go to your testimony and be like, oh, I know what this is about. And then make a recommendation to a judge where they can rule in a way that's consistent with the position you've been stating in the record all along. However, I recommend that you keep it simple. Many legislators don't read past the first page of testimony. And I'll also add to that, I think you guys have some colorful letterhead. So there is some value in branding. And if you are consistently submitting quality testimony again and again that the legislators come to trust, then they're going to continue paying attention to it. So I think this is a good year to kind of lay some foundation for that. There's some bills that, one in particular that I think you could use for that purpose. Don't worry about being original. As I said, no, plagiarism's okay, but at the same time, don't be shy about sharing your new unique perspective. It may resonate with a key decision maker or committee member. And, I've seen this happen a lot where it's like, it's like, hey, it wasn't part of the official legislators or the official professional association's position, but some of your memberships have like a unique tidbit or, a neighbor island thing or something that one of these legislators like, that's what it's about for me. So there's value, I think, in having your membership add their 2 cents. Don't underestimate the power of narrative. And I think especially with the type of work that you guys do and what you're looking to see happen. Appear in person if possible. And in crowds, this is from not in crowds this time, but in volume, I guess I would just strike crowds and say volume. Get all your colleagues to testify. Consider using images, articles, infographics, et cetera, in written testimony. A lot of these legislators don't read. So if you can, if you got some meme or something or a graph, I think that it'll be effective. Channel Clarence Darrow, who's a litigator known for his skill in appealing to juries' emotions. So, in a lot of legal proceedings, you're trying to be neutral and direct and objective, but the legislature, they're all about this, what's hot, what's a really polarizing topic. And if you can use the emotions to pull them in your favor, don't be afraid, and focus on your higher purpose. It's not really about you. It's about what this bill is about or whatever it might be. Don't be too discouraged by watered down drafts that amount to a resolution, a study, a working group, a task force. They still may become very valuable building blocks. Especially now, I'm seeing that happen with a lot of bills where these really interesting proposals or pilot projects, they're requiring money, and the legislature, one of the committees would be like, that's great, but we're not going to be able to fund it. So let's just kick it to one of these agencies like the Legislative Reference Bureau or the Ombudsman, or there's different groups out there that can do a study. Some examples I've seen is the Foreclosure Overhaul in 2011, 2012. That was based on recommendations made by a working group. So that was a couple years the working group was doing some work. I worked on a sepsis awareness resolution in 2016. That resolution really just helped to raise awareness, and that resolution was sent around and turned into a big campaign, like a PSA campaign. And then I used to work at the Office of Language Access, and there was just a lot of community support, and there's just a huge upwelling of support. So it was an inspired community bill, I would say. But if you're in front of a computer screen, if you're able to log on to the Capitol website, it's capitol.hawaii.gov. And so you guys got this here. So this is the home page of the Hawaii State Legislature. And I think this website is really good. I think it's pretty easy to navigate. First thing you want to do is register. So, so you're going to create an account, and hopefully that worked. I'm going to try and sign in. I'm going to just use my email that I've been using to submit testimony for this group and the psychologists and social workers. So here I am, I'm signed in, I'm logged into my account. If you know your bill numbers, you're going to enter them in here. You can look here. I found the rules for the Senate and House by looking in these buttons. You can dig a little bit for the rules of the House, which tell you more details about how fast the bill should be moving through. This is archives. And this is when I mentioned you can look at past years, go to archives, and then you could pick the year here. And then, so for example, you can just SB 222. Okay, here we are. I just pulled up SB 22 from 2016. But let's go back to the main page. Okay, so there are 6 bills that are coming up for hearing next week. Okay, so let's look at SB 620. This is about advanced practice nurses getting more authority to do things like capacity terminations. I know HPA is really interested in working on this as primary providers in advanced mental health care directives. So that's something that they're watching. This is the status. This shows you what's happened with this bill. It was introduced on the 22nd of January, passed first reading in the House. That's when everyone the Senate, that's when everyone on the floor, every legislator on the floor in the Senate actually reads it, which isn't really reading, it's just on a list. After the first reading, because it requires 3 readings in each House. So the first reading was right after it's introduced. Then it's referred to the subject matter committees. And so HTH is health, CPN is consumer protection. There's a slash here. So that means it's jointly referred. So who the Senate president leadership decided this is has as much to do with health as it is to consumer protection. So we're going to jointly refer, except for health is the lead on this joint referral. And then after those committees hear it, then it's going to go to JDC, which is the judiciary. Then what happened was on the 16th that the health committee recommended it pass with amendments, and it tells you the votes. And then the second end of that, the backslash, the CPN, because they operate sort of independently, even though this is a joint committee, they all voted, different members, they all voted and passed with amendments. And then took a couple days for them to generate the report. That's typical, but then the committee, the joint committee, issues a report just explaining what they did in committee. And then the report is adopted by the entire chamber. And then it's referred to the next committee, JDC, which is here, JDC. And then here, JDC says it's going to have a public decision making on March 2nd. This committee report is really useful, especially if you don't want to sit and read the bill and see what's different. You can go to the committee report right here and scroll through this. It'll tell you the purpose and intent of this bill, this measure is these things. And then it kind of summarizes, we got testimony and support from these organizations, a lot of nurses. And then there's a little bit of language about, what the committee thinks about it. There's a need for greater access, some other factoids or position points they want to make. And then they say, we've amended this measure based on this stuff. We've amended this measure by inserting an effective date of July 1st, 2050, which is like, what is that? That's crazy. 2050, why do they want to wait? This is really just a way to make this bill what they call defective. So if they have an effectiveness date that's like, I don't know what the threshold is, but if it's like 30 years in the future, there's no way it's going to pass because it's defective. It's sort of like a circuit breaker on the process. And so the committee put this circuit breaker in there to make sure it doesn't pass, to encourage further discussion. So it's like crippling the bill until they figure out how they really want to finalize it. And then in conference committee is usually when they correct the effectiveness date, and then it makes it no longer defective and they can pass. And then the other amendments they did was just technical, non-substantive. So really what this committee did was just make a few tweaks, nothing substantive. So the next time this bill comes up, if you wanted to testify on it, your testimony could be pretty much the same as in the first bill. Okay, so let me go through some of the other bills that are coming up. So you may or may not be interested in that one. Here's another that's coming up next week, 619. Another APRN, this one amends provisions concerning fitness to proceed examinations in criminal proceedings. You may or may not be interested, but I'll show you another one. SB 1242. So these were all bills from my mental health measure tracking list that are like actionable right now. This one, relating to trauma-informed care, establishes a trauma-informed care task force within DOH to make recommendations of trauma-informed care in the state. This might be something that you guys want to weigh in on. And so you can just sort of follow through what happened, read the committee report. Here's the two different bills. You can see what's different. Testimony on the first bill and testimony on the second bill. I'll go into that on another bill that may be of greater interest to you. SB 905 is another that's coming up relating to the State Council on Mental Health. Requires the State Council on Mental Health to have members who have knowledge of Native Hawaiian health practices. This may be something that you support. It seemed that was the sentiment when I was talking with some of you guys. So something to put on your list. SB 732. Relating to, this one is engendered a lot of interest, relating to Nonviolent Response Team Pilot Program. It directs, now this looked different. This is an interesting one. It directs the LRB, which is a drafting agency, and they do like studies, to conduct a study examining the efficacy of the Hawai'i CARES program offered by Department of Health's Behavioral Health Administration, Adult Mental Health Division. Doesn't really tell you much, but this was really, I'll just show you. This is the SD1. So they changed it in the health committee. So the health committee recommended the measure be passed with amendments. Well, let's see what the committee report says. So here we are. The purpose of the original bill, SB 732, was to direct the Department of Health to create a 2-year nonviolent response team pilot program and to give it money. And so, you know, the Hawaii Psychological Association, various organizations testified in support. Look, the Department of Health testified in opposition. They don't want more work. But here's some factoids about the homeless, those with mental health problems. So what these guys said, okay, well, DOH doesn't really want to do it right now, so we're going to kick it to LRB to do a study. So therefore, your committee has amended this measure by deleting its contents. And so this is like a gut and replace situation, deleting the contents and inserting language of to direct LRB to do the study. This happens a lot. And in the study, the LRB needs to look at these things in a financial report. So like, can we afford this? So this is what Senator Keohokalole had done. I'm getting better at that. So that's how you know what change was made from the last bill. And if you wanted to see, like, so what did DOH say exactly? Well, let's go to the testimony. Well, here we are. I actually know this guy. He's an attorney, and he supported the idea. Bob Merce. Here's your cousin, the HPA, and they supported it. So it's kind of, I guess, lead program. There's a couple different approaches that this kind of softens HPD response to mentally ill. Some other folks that are testifying. Where is DOH here?
So Becky,
yeah.
could I ask a quick question that's kind of
Sure.
related to this?
Yeah.
Christy Chadwick, who's our Maui rep, had asked, can you suggest how to write effective testimony? Because you had mentioned like graphs or memes, and I'm not seeing any memes in here, although I can imagine a meme being in here.
Yeah, well, okay. Funny. See how this late stamp? Ooh. Like, oh, they're late. So if you don't get your testimony in before 24 hours before the hearing, you get this like beautiful late red stamp. I mean, there's going to be a lot of those because these guys aren't giving enough notice, but I'll just use this as an example. Like this pops, and that's my unconventional advice. I'm a little unconventional myself, but it's something that people notice. And I say this from, like, I did this sepsis awareness campaign and I put in testimony, like a bunch of infographics that caught people's eye. And I noticed it because people were replicating what they read in the infographic. So that's just my experience, you know, people are visual and that'll pop. So, but this late thing pops out. So these guys, the DOH testified late on this proposal and they opposed it. And they've got their reasons and they mention all these things. So if you wanted to understand this better, you know, you can read this and then craft testimony to address some of these concerns on the next go around is my suggestion. But look at this, Young Progressive has this like really nice bright logo. So late. So all these come late. So the late testimony comes at the end. Usually what they do in testimony is they will put okay, let's go to the SD one. So the next, after it went through health, then it was referred to WHAM, Ways and Means. And this is the testimony that was submitted by Ways and Means. So isn't it funny? The Legislative Reference Bureau is now supposed to do it. So they're weighing in now. They're like, oh, okay, here's some comments. This is gonna be expensive for us, or, you know, whatever. We just want some clarifications if you really want us to do this. Okay, and then here's what may be your cause célèbre, SB 839, Our Care, Our Choice. And this authorizes APRNs, in addition to physicians, to practice medical aid in dying within their scope of practice and prescribing authority, authorizes psychiatric mental health nurse practitioners and clinical nurse specialists, in addition to psychiatrists, psychologists, and clinical social workers, to provide counseling to a qualified patient, reduces the mandatory waiting period between oral requests from 20 days to 15 days, and waives that waiting period for those who are in a very dire situation. So we are now at an SD1 here. Curious what was the change, so I'm going to check it out in the committee reports. So this is like a summary of the bill, summary of who testified, summary of what the committee thinks about it. They think it's, you know, peaceful and humane, dignified, and all the rest of it. They heard testimony from the Board of Nursing, which noted that the measure as written excludes clinical nurse specialists who specialize in adult psychiatric mental health from providing care. Therefore, your committee has amended the measure by amending the definition of counseling to include consultations from clinical nurse specialists, changing the purpose section of this bill. Sometimes the very first section of a bill just gives you the legislative intent, and then some technical non-substantive amendments. So that was the big change in this bill. Well, let's take a look at what some of the testimony was. This is the first one. So this is when they talk about it. The Board of Nursing says, include us, because clinical nurse practitioners or clinical nurse specialists can do this. And they, something from the State Center for Nursing, some testimony from more groups. That was a long one. Oh, okay, he's the state director. He's the executive branch on this. And wow, there's 124. You guys testified on this, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yep,
I think,
there we are.
yep, there we are. Yeah.
Okay, so this is really a nice logo, catches your eye, and this is what you guys said. And this is the first bill. This is before the clinical nurse specialists was added. Strongly support it. We support APRNs doing this. We support psychiatric mental health nurse practitioners doing what they need to do. While you guys strongly support the bill, we believe it can be strengthened to further achieve the purpose and intent of this legislation by adding marriage family therapists to the core of professionals who can do the counseling. So working on this with you guys, I'm like, oh yeah, totally makes absolute sense. I'm so on board with this idea. There are 1 of 5 core mental health professionals. I don't need to tell you, you are this, so you know. So what we did in this testimony said, well, we asked that the MFTs be added to the professionals authorized to provide counseling services. And we went ahead and did that. We took the language from the bill, page 4, line 14, copied it here, and then we highlighted the change we want to see. So we can make it real easy. So the staff can like take this, circle it, give it to the drafter, be like, okay, make the next draft that says this. Okay, and there's Dr. John's very nice signature, and that's what the MFTs did. Except there's 124 pages of testimony here. So I'm actually not surprised that they didn't pick up on this, particularly if no one testifies orally. So I just want to make that point that testifying orally is going to be perhaps the most effective in getting their attention. So you can be like, red flag, chair, did you think about this? And you just add like the squeaky wheel there when they're making the decision. So I would recommend, if you want to see this change, that someone from your group present orally the testimony. They may only give you like 1 to 3 minutes, especially because there's so much testimony on this. But maybe Joy and John can talk about some of their back channel stuff that they're working on. But I just want to finish up with this process. If you guys are ready to testify on this, hold on a second. Okay. Sorry, you're not able to testify on this right now, but if you wanted to see, so when this got set for hearing, the SD1 got set for hearing, it was just not enough time for you guys to like get together and figure out your position and draft testimony and get it in. But because it was like a day. So, but after talking to you guys, and looking at the bill, I actually sort of came up with my own theories on how it's drafted and how it'll actually work. And I don't think that the way it's drafted, the clinical nurse specialists who are authorized to do the counseling are required to have the mental health training. I don't read that. I think it's just, they're just giving clinical nurse specialists vanilla the ability to do this counseling. And my opinion is that if anybody should be doing this counseling, it's you guys, because the family relationships are so important in this decision. And there's a lot of aftermath that needs to be contended with. So if you wanted to cockroach some of this, you could go to the testimony, and I'm on page 70 of 79. I just did a control find for my last name, Gardner. And then, you feel free to copy any of that if you like. But I said here, I think the main point was, in this vein, I think it would be more appropriate to add marriage family therapists to those professionals qualified to provide this counseling, as they may be in the best position to navigate all the family dynamics at play. So they didn't do it then, but I think when this gets crosses over to the House, that may be your shot at making this happen. So it moved from the health committee to the judiciary committee, and that's it for this side. It's going to go through crossover, go to the House side, and that's when you get your shot. If you guys want to testify on anything right now, I kind of like the crisis bill, and I'll just show you SB 732, the relating to nonviolent response team pilot program. Okay, I'm just gonna submit testimony right now live, and you can see how it goes. I'm going to click this submit testimony because this is set for hearing. You're not able to submit testimony unless it's set for hearing. So unless it's like toggled on for hearing coming up, you're just going to have to wait, which is too bad because you could probably save yourself a lot of time, but not until it's set for hearing, because a committee may actually decline to hear it. If a committee chair is like, oh, I don't like these guys, or I don't like this bill, they can just like ignore it and then it dies. So just be aware that could happen. That could happen after crossover. It could be like a hot topic on one chamber and then it moves over and no one cares in the other chamber, or it's like a chess piece of sorts. You know, there's all sorts of reasons why things die, but I'm going to submit testimony. 732. This is a whole bunch of like disclosure stuff on how it works. And, you know, if you want to learn more about the process, there's links here, there's like videos. But I'm going to continue because I know how to do. Oh, this one's good. View instructions. But I'm going to click continue here. And I support this as an individual citizen. I'm not representing myself as this right now, and I'm going to submit written testimony. I'm just going to say something really simple. I strongly support this bill. I would prefer the original version. This is a timely matter, and we can't afford to wait for a study to, and we'll just keep it like that. And I'm gonna submit. I mean, my fantasy was like, you guys would all do it together and we'd be like, hey, submit. But I don't know if you guys are ready for that. And you might want to think about something really poignant to say. So, but here I am gonna submit. You can save progress too. You can start, you know, you could add some like bullet points and then come back to it later. But I'm going to go ahead and submit. I strongly support the bill. I would prefer the original version. This is a timely matter. We can't afford to wait for a study. Submit. It gives you a shot to like backtrack, but I'm going to go okay. Your testimony was submitted and should appear in the list to the left. So this is helpful too. If you can't remember, say you're just like a machine and you're testifying on everything and you forget, like, I don't remember, did I? I'm not sure. You just go to this green list and you see all the bills that you testified on. And this is the one I just, SD1, 732 SD1, view. Like, what did I say? I don't know what I said. What did I say? Oh, there it is. I strongly support the bill. And I've done this in the past. I would copy this. And then when it comes up for the next hearing, then I paste it in testimony for the next draft, if, you know, and then tweak it if you need to. And make sure that, so as you can see here, these are bills that I testified it on, you know, on my own. The non-SDHDs are show up the bottom. And then here you can see. So make sure that you click on the right one. Just, you know, make sure you know which draft that you're testifying on.
It really is just that simple.
Yeah.
You literally could just type in, I strongly support this, and you have submitted testimony.
Yeah. Let me tell you, sorry, let me show you something else. I got to share again. So this is sort of like your home page after you're registered and you're logged in. I want to find out every time SB 732, which I just testified on, actually moves. So I can subscribe to get a hearing notification. What was it, SB or yeah, SB 732, add. And this is on my list of bills that I will get an email on when there's action on it. So when it's referred to the next committee, or maybe when the chamber votes on it. So that, or you can, and what I did is I subscribed to the Health and Human Services Committee. So every time HHH puts out a hearing notice, and that'll have like, 10, 12, 15 bills on it, then I get an email that says, okay, Health just put out a notice, and I see what's on it. But you can also do the same per measure. Another thing, okay, save and exit. Another thing that's really, so that was the hearing notification. You looked at the testimony. Measure tracker. This is the one that I've been using quite a bit. So all of the bills that I've been following for you guys, the psychologists, social workers, I created a list, mental health HIAMFT, show list. And these are all the bills that kind of relate to mental health. And there's quite a bit. Maybe there's like 160, 170. So I put them all in sort of, it's a little tricky, but I figured out how you can have like an Excel sheet and like paste it from the column and put it in here, but you're supposed to separate them by like, I kind of did it here, but you should separate them by commas. But okay, generate report. So this is what I've been doing so I can notify you guys what's happening. I generate report. And this is the description of the bill. This is the title, relating to. Remember I said gut and replace. Gut and replace has to relate to whatever this is relating to. And so this is the current status. This was the last action that happened. This is who introduced it. This is the referral. This is companion. Okay, so this is the trick that I've been using to find out what's the most recent thing. I click on current status. And this just sort of changed the way it's listed. So this was like the first thing that ever happened to any bill on my list. It was referred to these committees. And then the next thing on the January 25th is this bill was referred. I'm going to click on this again, and it changes the date. So the most recent shows up on top. And so then I know, okay, today's the 26th. This bill, WHAM just passed it with amendments. This bill, ERS thing, Finn just passed unamended. This behavior analyst bill passed by Finn unamended. And so what I'm looking for, like these, I'm not as interested in, because it's already sort of a done deal for now, but this is what I'm looking for. The Committee on JDC will hold a public decision making on 3/2. Okay. So I'm going to make note of this and put it on my list to notify you guys what's happening. And this is the one that I mentioned, the ACT. So everything that I just mentioned today that I showed you, they're showing up at the top of this list because they were just put on for hearing like yesterday or today. So you can make your own personal list. It doesn't even have to relate to what you do for work. You can, if there's other stuff that you're following, whatever it might be, education stuff, you can add that to your list and testify as you please.
Wow, that is incredible. My mind is just blown right now, Becky.
Really?
I gotta tell you. Yeah.
Well, it can be fairly simple if you have the time and space to act when you need to act. I think that's the tricky part. But the notifications, the measure tracking, hearing notifications will be really helpful, I think.
Yeah.
You can now through the virtual format, and I'm hoping they're going to stick with it for years. advocates were trying to get this kind of format so people on the neighbor island don't have to, and it's like heartbreaking, you know, we go to a hearing and then maybe the chair's like, we know that most of you here are here to support it, so we're just not going to listen to any of you, we just recognize it. And you spent hundreds of dollars coming to Oahu. I mean, that's really, I think so much of this process, what's important is just like the agency and expressing yourself and feeling like you're getting heard, even if it's a foregone conclusion in a lot of different circumstances. But I think it's like really important for people to express themselves. And I think more people who do that, the legislators are going to listen instead of it just like going through the motions. So hopefully the virtual testimony is going to be permanent, maybe not exclusive. They'll probably have in person, like some sort of hybrid, but hopefully we'll have more neighbor islands weighing in on some stuff too. Yeah. In fact, so many advocacy groups, they got really crafty and they like created these web platforms where all you have to do is put your name in a field and the testimony is already drafted. It's prefabbed completely and you just click submit and it does it for you. Some of them will let you revise it, doctor it in some ways, but you know, the objective is just like get as many people weighing in as possible and make it easy for people. And all they have to do is like click, click, click. So that's not uncommon to look at some of the testimony and it's like the same text 50 times, you know, and I would rather see something that's a little bit more personalized, you know, if I were a decision maker, but you can't ignore the volume. So plagiarism, yeah, you don't really have to worry about that. But I also, the flip side is like, I think it's really valuable to back it up with empirical evidence or, you know, some citations or something, because it just looks more legit. And especially now with the electronic testimony, some of the hyperlinks, you know, people can go to it. And not even just for the legislators, it's for people like me who like, oh, I don't know what this bill is about and what people think about it. So I'm going to go read the testimony and then I'm like, oh, that's what this is about. Get it. And then I can click on whatever, you know, article that they're citing. I'm like, okay, like one of the psychologists shared this article on chronic stress. And I was like, oh, that's a good one. I want to read that one, you know? So, nothing stopping me from doing that. And I've seen, for example, there's this commercial lease relief bill that I've been helping Kaimuki Professional Business Association with, and they've done a lot of good work in like videoing some of the local businesses that sort of had to shutter themselves with the COVID and thing. And so they have these real tearjerker videos, and they put hyperlinks in their testimony to their videos. But that's like up to the legislator, whoever wants to watch it, to click it. They're not going to play the video for the hearing. You know, the legislators will be like, no, we just want to move through this because we got 20 bills and, you know, we can't click on everyone. So they're going to want to expect you. And then you also have to put in your request to testify live 24 hours in advance. That's one of their rules. So yes, you could put the link and hopefully more people will see it. I think that's a good idea, but I wouldn't expect whoever is chairing the hearing to click on it and show it to the world. Yeah, and I'll just say with this experience with the commercial leases that I just had, so I was able to watch the hearing from here, and I one commercial landlord talk about like hands off, you know, let business people do business people, government should stay away, you know, like I'm a good landlord and all this stuff. And then the guy right after him was like, I'm a small business and I got like hosed by my landlord. And and so those two testimonies juxtaposed, like I took that bit and I gave it to KBPA, like, show everybody in your organization this. And they have a sense of like how people are playing it. And they're like, oh, that first guy, we got to like counter that. So, so the huge advantage this session, now that we've gone all virtual and all of these hearings are on YouTube, it's there for perpetuity, and we can pick from it, and we can put a spotlight on it, right? Like, this is what they said. And this even happened with the 48-hour notice. That happens on the floor when everyone's there, and they have they require 48 hours notice, but when they waive it, they have to show good cause. And then when I listened to the floor hearing, they said, oh, here's like 10 bills that we just want to ram through. And they didn't explain what the bill's about. They didn't show any good cause whatsoever. And they're like, fine. And that happens, I think, I mean, I've never really noticed it before because I wasn't really working it from this perspective before. But apparently that happens quite often where it's just like, you know, and it was like, where's the good cause? But now we have virtual, and I can see it, and I can go back and I can play, and I put it on my Facebook. And so lots of potential for sunshine, as you could say, for accountability and transparency now. So cool. I'm like happy to share the tools so you guys can like wield it, and and it's not even just your work, you can get involved in all sorts of things.
I can really see that now. Thank you so much, Becky. And just looking at the chat here, Melissa, Joy, Dr. Hawkins, all of us just saying thank you so much. Dr. Hawkins said, I feel so much more equipped to track and monitor bills, but also to find ways to advocate for change. Yes, exactly.
Yay, chills. That was the objective. Awesome. Yeah. It's also like, it can get you energized, right? Yeah. You're like, you're not going to pull this with us. Right. We know how to do this. Like, sometimes they're just counting on the populace not paying attention. Not paying attention. So, well, I guess you have it recorded, so feel free to play again. And then if there's like other things that you want to get into, let me know. It was great working with you guys. Thanks so much for having me. Have a great weekend.
Hello, everyone. Take care.
Okay. Take care. Bye.